Good afternoon, everyone. We'll get started in just a minute. I just want to give people a couple minutes to join back on. Thank you so much for joining us for the first session of our May speaker series. We're really excited to speak to you here today. So yeah, we'll just get started in just a couple of minutes. Thank you for joining. All right, we can go ahead and get started then. Again, thank you so much for joining. I know people will continue to join as we begin. I just wanted to welcome you to our May Speaker Series. This is our second annual series, and so we really appreciate you taking the time and coming just to kind of hear the great just kind of resources and the work that we're doing with the Fairfax Reentry Council. So my name is Vincent Smith. I'm a senior staff attorney at Legal Services of Northern Virginia. So it's my pleasure to introduce the panel here today. And then I'll just let them take it over with their good work. So this today is going to be about just an intro to the Fairfax Reentry Council in general, and just kind of the importance, why we think it's important to kind of have a DEI, a diversity, equity, and inclusion lens when we look at reentry work and the work that we're all doing and we're all getting involved in. So just a couple of things. You're welcome to keep your camera off. I will spotlight each speaker as they kind of come forward so you can see them. Please feel free to ask any questions in the chat. There will be a time at the end. The speakers will all answer questions. So really just excited for this conversation, and hopefully you'll join us for the sessions moving forward. But without further ado, I'd like to introduce just the speakers and the turns that they will be speaking. So first off, we have Derwin Overton. Derwin is the Executive Director of Opportunities, Alternatives, and Resources, OA, also known as OAR. OAR is a nonprofit organization that was established in 1971. This provides pre-release and post-incarceration services, along with alternative sentencing services to individuals and their families that are going through the criminal legal process in Fairfax, Prince William, and Loudoun counties. Derwin has more than 19 years of experience in nonprofit human services administration, and prior to OAR, he was the assistant director at Embry Rucker Community Shelter and the director of the California House, which is a Bureau of Rehabilitation. So thank you, Derwin. Next up we have is Lakita Sykes. Lakita Sykes is the Chief Probation and Parole Officer for Fairfax Probation and Parole. During the course of her career, Chief Sykes has served as a reentry probation officer in Norfolk, a senior reentry probation officer in Norfolk and Fairfax, and deputy chiefs in Leesburg. She's a graduate of Old Dominion University with a bachelor's degree in criminal justice. Next up we have is Caitlin Sweeney. Caitlin is a senior reentry probation officer for Fairfax Probation and Parole. Prior to her promotion to this position, she was a probation officer in Alexandria City. Caitlin is a graduate of George Mason University with a bachelor's degree in administration of justice. She is also the convener of the Reentry Council, and so she's the boss around here. Last but not least, we have Angela Tillman, who's a Deputy Chief Probation and Parole Officer in Fairfax with Fairfax Probation and Parole. She has 20 plus years experience with Virginia Department of Corrections. As an employee of the department, her primary role has been to be a probation and parole officer, but in addition to being a BO, she also has served as an adjunct instructor with the Academy for Staff Development, facilitated training and cultural diversity, and managed a multi-generational workforce for DOC employees, which is facilitated by cognitive behavioral training for probationers and parolees, and has served as an ethics coach, as a member of the executive board of Virginia Probation and Parole Association, and the Director's Diversity and Inclusion Council Steering Committee. Whew, that was a mouthful. Okay, so without further ado, I'd just like to turn it over to Derwin Overton, just kind of speak a little bit about the history of the council and like how we got here. So thank you.
Thank you, Vincent, and good afternoon, everybody. I am pleased to have this opportunity to speak to you about the history of the Reentry Council. I feel like an old relic right now. When people start coming to you asking you to talk about history or things, it potentially could mean you've been somewhere too long or you need to do something different. So I hope neither one of those are the case, but I will gladly review and talk about the history of the Reentry Council. The Fairfax County Reentry Council was established in 2011. However, before establishing the Fairfax County Reentry Council, there was a state initiative that was started, and it was established under the Virginia Community Reentry Initiative, VCRI, and the Fairfax Reentry Council was developed to facilitate a more effective reentry process for recently released inmates into the Fairfax County community. We in turn recruited individuals or representatives from the local Department of Social Services, community organizations, and public safety entities, and we have all partnered and then also brought together representatives from local law enforcement, corrections, faith-based organizations, other community service providers, as well as community members who wanted to be a part. The goal in 2011 of VCRI, as well as the Fairfax Council, was to increase public safety and reduce recidivism through more effectual reentry planning and service delivery at the community level. Fairfax had voluntarily already begun the process of organizing and firmly establishing the council even before they asked us to do this, but this was the time when it became formalized and an original way for us to serve individuals who are reentering back into the community. When we first started off in 2011, believe it or not, we had two conveners. One was Tracy Laveley, who was the Chief Probation Officer of Fairfax Probation and Parole for District 29. And the other convener in 2011 is yours truly, Derwin Overton. We also put together what we considered an executive team or a team of individuals that could really help us. And they eventually evolved into what we call the steering committee, which we still have as far as leaders are concerned within the Reentry Council. Part of the entities that were represented as far as the steering committee was concerned was the Skill Source, the Community Service Board, and Skill Source is now CareerWorks, the Community Service Board, the CCJB, George Mason University, and there was a couple of other entities that we had involved. Our primary goal or thing that we were working on in 2011 was to produce a toolkit. The toolkit was something that would be given to individuals that were returning from incarceration or back into the community that would be a paper-based document that, and it would be available online as well, but we were doing it in paper because of the lack of access to the internet and other ways of being able to get online information for our clientele. And we did create a website where we also had this information, but our first toolkit was a paper toolkit that in turn had a variety of categories: education, housing, food, clothing, you name it. And this was a document that we were going to give to each and every individual that all members of the Reentry Council were serving. I'm proud to say that we were successful in developing this, but I'm not too sure that the implementation of this was the best way of doing it with online products and other things that we could have. And it was very hard to keep up because you had a variety of paper versions out, but it was helpful to the individuals that we were seeing and working with. I don't think that I shared all the items. Some of the other items in the toolkit was substance abuse treatment, conditions and benefits of probation, a participant agreement for engaging with what we were doing, a skill source calendar, a resource directory where that you can go in order to be able to find things for self-help. As we know, sometimes our clients come with different levels of can do. And for the ones that were very independent, we wanted to have this for them to be able to use it, but for the ones who weren't, then we would work with them in order to help them as much as possible. Our next step that we had was looking forward to the council is getting the toolkit and the website off ground. And then once the toolkit is developed, our next task at hand, or the next thing that we wanted to develop or discuss, is something that we're still kind of discussing to this day, 11 years later. What type of resource council did we want to be? When resource councils first started, there was two different types of There was two different types of reentry councils, forgive me, and I just gave away one of them. It was one just to do resources, and the other one was to actually see clients, triage them, and help them with their issues and concerns as far as reentry is concerned. The Fairfax County Reentry Council decided to be a resource reentry council, which means that we would in turn make sure that everybody had knowledge and accessibility to the resources, but we would not be staffing cases or anything like that. However, there has been a time in 11 years that we did staff cases, but one of the biggest challenges in doing that was confidentiality and being able to speak about the individuals and going forward from there. I'm very proud to say that we had our first meeting for the Fairfax Reentry Council on April 8th. We had Tracy Muli Aluamonte, Marcia Ecknert from SkillSource, myself, Will Williams from CSB. We had Virginia Scott, who was a state regional Department of Family Services individual, and we had Jane Brown, who was basically the founder or the individual that really started the initiative of reentry councils and was responsible to the Virginia DOC, and maybe not the DOC, but to the Virginia DCJS in doing the reentry council and making sure it goes forward. One of the first things we did in our very first meeting is that we identified a variety of entities that we wanted to include and engage with so that they can become part of the Reentry Council. An example of some of them are the Fairfax City Police Chief, Fairfax County Police Chief, a community volunteer who was a long-term chief of probation, Leslie Bupenhofer. We added in homelessness. We had Department of Family Services, adult education, previously incarcerated individuals. From day one, we always thought and always knew that that was an important voice to have in the direction of what we wanted to do. So we included that voice in our work and how we were doing things to move forward. We had Fairfax County Police Victim Unit, George Mason, represented by Faye Taxman, Northern Virginia Community College, Chamber of Commerce, CCJB, Supervisor Hudgens, and the Faith Community and the Faith Community in Action. Jane Brown provided us background information. And I don't know, this is an interesting tidbit to me, and I don't know if everybody knew this, but Coffeywood Prison was going to be the reentry prison for Fairfax County. And what that means is that individuals who were supposed to return back to Fairfax County in 2011 were supposed to go to Coffeywood. Coffeywood was supposed to have certain training programs predicated upon the needs for employers in our area. So if we needed CDCs, Coffeywood was supposed to help people to get CDCs. If we needed carpenters, they were supposed to help them to get that. I'm not too sure how far we ever got with that, but that would be an interesting thing as far as a feeder, making sure that people had certain skills and were ready to reenter back into the community. That was supposed to happen 3 to 6 months before they were actually released from incarceration. And an assessment was supposed to be given to each individual while in the DOC, so that we're able to know the risk levels, high risk, medium risk, and low risk. And for people who may not know, when we talk about risk levels, we're not talking about the risk of committing violent crimes. We're talking about the risk of them returning back into incarceration and what we can do to prevent them from returning back into incarceration. The notes talk again, and I'm repeating something, is does the council want to be a resource or a service council was the language that they had in the notes. And then the council can also expect to receive from DOC a list of individuals that are returning to the area that will need services so that we will know and we can all be prepared. But we know with COVID and other things that have happened, the ability to know the people that are coming back into the area early has really been a challenge. My summary of all of this is that we've been doing this work now for 11 years. We've stayed very active. Probation and parole has taken a very active role in making sure that we've had at least one convener. As far as the the Reentry Council is concerned, we usually had 2. We're looking for another one in order to take some of the burden off of Caitlin and help her with leading this group. And we're very excited for what we've done. And we look forward to another successful 11 years. I will turn this back over to Mr. Smith. And that was my review of history. And we will go forward from there. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, Derwin. I appreciate it. So next up we have is Chief Sykes.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Lakita Sykes, and I serve as the Chief Probation and Parole Officer for District 29 Fairfax Probation and Parole. Thank you, Derwin, for that history. You have a wealth of knowledge there, and I'm glad that you started us off. Thank you all for allowing me to address you during your lunch hour and to kick us off for an awesome month celebrating reentry during the course of this speaker series. The Virginia Department of Corrections prides itself on being a premier agency, and we are in the business of helping people to be better. For we know that reentry does not start when a person is released from confinement, nor when they are sentenced in court. Reentry begins the moment following commission of a crime. Research tells us that if surrounded by the right people and resources, that individual can begin to establish or rebuild a life that is law-abiding and rewarding. I am happy to report that our current rate of recidivism is 22.3%, which makes Virginia only second in the country. This success can be attributed to the implementation of several business practices developed and supported over the course of about 12 years, starting with the institutions, creating cognitive communities that very much mimic what life is like on the outside. So kind of referencing what Derwin spoke about, those reentry pods, preparing individuals for success in release. In these communities, inmates participated in daily motivation, and they also occupy roles that teach responsibility, accountability, and respect. The latest rollout has been our dialogue skills training for inmates. The Dialogue Practitioner Program was brought to the department to set a foundation for which we communicate in order to improve outcomes. Staff statewide have received certifications, becoming trainers, coaches, and working dialogue practitioners. Now inmates are being equipped in the same manner with the goal of reduce altercations while in custody, as well as reduce recidivism upon release. As you know, our state government has embraced diversity, opportunity, and inclusion. Healthy dialogue puts everyone on an equal playing field and is inclusive of all voices. Ideas are advanced and welcomed. Practices are challenged without reprisal. Other business practices that have diversity and inclusion as a goal include the purposeful reduction of biased decision-making. Fairfax Probation and Parole, as well as several other jurisdictions in probation, utilize ARM, which is an automated response matrix to address behaviors, both positive and negative. This matrix is embedded in our offender management system, and the questionnaires are assessed by officers to make determinations when responding with incentives or sanctions. Officer and/or supervisor judgment is less of a factor, as well as any other implicit bias. The recommended action, when completed, results in a more consistent application of rewards and/or punitive actions. Our Compass is a risk needs assessment tool. This is another questionnaire-based screening in which determines the appropriate level of supervision. When utilized accurately, it is effective in removing implicit bias when assigning level intensity, as well as guides the collaborative development of their case plan. Following the completion of our SWOT analysis, which stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, the department formed several work groups to address potential concerns. Compass R, which is scheduled as a replacement in late fall of this year, promises to address issues of transparency as it will publicly be available with copyright protection. The needs scale point system will be transparent, and the general recidivism risk scale will transform to a summative scale. Lastly, I'll speak on EPICS, which is effective practices in correctional settings. EPICS is a set of evidence-based skills utilized by officers to collaborate with supervisees. This collaboration incorporates motivational interviewing and promotes autonomy for supervisees to chart their own path. Officers are there to support and challenge their thinking. However, increased sustainability is dependent on the supervisee's level of commitment and engagement with their case plan. The goal is sustainability. SUSTAIN is a skill-based development program formerly known as SOARing. Through the use of SOARing observations, the interactions of officers and assigned supervisees are observed by a supervisor, and immediate feedback is given to the officer, thereby offering praise as well as constructive evaluations to improve future contacts. These observations occur about 3 times per year until a level of mastery is obtained, then reduces to annual. The goal is consistency, ensuring that officers have the tools to effectively impact the lives that we touch every day through our reentry efforts. Now you will hear from Caitlin Sweeney, our Senior Reentry Probation and Parole Officer, as well as convener of this fine council. Thank you all.
Thank you, Chief Sykes. As Chief Sykes mentioned, I'm Caitlin Sweeney, Senior Reentry Probation Officer here in Fairfax. As part of my role as Senior Reentry Officer, I am the co-convener of the Fairfax Reentry Council, and I'm excited to be here today to talk to you about the future of the council, as well as one of the events that we are planning for the near future. So as we heard during Derwin and Lakita's presentations, the council is comprised of organizations from a variety of disciplines that are all dedicated to supporting reentry efforts in Fairfax County. As part of our efforts to continually evolve to meet the needs of our community, we recently revised our mission statement to more closely reflect the work the council is currently doing and seeks to do in the future. Our mission is to provide collaborative support and resources that identify and eliminate the barriers that individuals impacted by the criminal legal system and their families face. The word collaborative is a critical part of that statement. As we know, partnership and collaboration amongst community agencies is an essential part of reentry success, as we are each a different piece of the puzzle. While the COVID-19 pandemic limited our ability to meet in person, the council adjusted to the new normal and has been meeting virtually to keep that collaboration going. After over 2 years of operating on a virtual platform, I'm excited to announce that the council is planning an in-person event. We will be holding a picnic with our council partners, as well as returning citizens and their families on June 25th in Fairfax City. In addition to creating and fostering more community partnerships, this picnic will also celebrate the reentry successes of returning citizens in our community. Some of the individuals we work with were released during the pandemic and returned home to a world vastly different from what it was when they were first incarcerated. Reentry is a difficult journey in the best of circumstances, but the pandemic presented a host of new challenges for those we serve. This picnic will provide those who attend with the opportunity to learn about available community resources, as well as with a chance to celebrate their successes thus far and share their voice with us. More details and a flyer for the picnic will be distributed this month on our council email distribution list. If you're interested in being added to our distribution list, please feel free to email me. In closing, I want to thank all of the council members for their efforts towards our mission, as well as thanking all of you for taking the time to be here. Once again, if you're interested in joining the council or our email distribution list, please feel free to reach out to me, and I will pass it back to Vincent. Thank you very much.
Sweet. Thank you so much, Caitlin. I appreciate it. That just kind of concluded. We really wanted to do this as kind of a two-part kind kind of vision and a view for this session. So first, we just wanted to introduce the council, give a little bit of history about just kind of where we started and just kind of where we're going right now, just kind of with an understanding about that. But then the second thing we want to do is we wanted to introduce kind of why we decided to do this series, and specifically about diversity, specifically under the lens of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so I will not speak for too much longer because I'm not the expert here, but we do have one. And so please provide your questions to Angela Tillman. I would just like to say that we thought it was important to focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion, not just from one particular perspective, but to take a broader view, just to kind of to understand the way that the carceral system affects children, how we focus on, programming concerned in dealing with women, and then just kind of how the carceral system works with individuals with disabilities. And so we're hoping that you will join the next 3 sessions where we really kind of dive into each one of those areas. However, we just like to discuss this diversity, equity, and inclusion in general. And with that, I'll turn it over to
I think that was Vincent's turn over to me. Thank you so much, Vincent. I appreciate that. I would want to give one disclaimer. I'm certainly not the subject matter expert in the area of diversity, equity, inclusion. It is just something that is near and dear to my heart. So thank you so much, Vincent. And thank you to the panel. Good afternoon, all. I am Angela Tillman, Chief Probation and Parole Officer with Fairfax Probation and Parole. And as a member of the Fairfax Reentry Council, I'm completely excited about being a part of this panel discussion today. Simply stated, reentry is our business with the Virginia Department of Corrections. I'm going to reiterate that because that's our business. Reentry is our business with the Virginia Department of Corrections. If you ever go anywhere, you will know that what's always going to be said is that we are in the business of helping people be better. Simply stated, that's what we do. I know it's kind of conflicting when you think about Department of Corrections, but really that's our mantra. That's what we stand on. We are in the business of helping people be better. And I'll just add a little caveat to that, is that we meet people where they are. And I say this simply because as a member of the council, which is comprised of organizations from a variety of disciplines that are dedicated to supporting reentry efforts in Fairfax County, my hope is that this series will elevate an understanding about the work that is being done through the council. Yeah, I want us to better understand what exactly we're doing. You just had the opportunity to hear from our wondrous and illustrious chief, and I'll give a shout out. She has been chief here for 1 year, effective April 25, and she is doing great things. So big shout out to you, Chief Sykes. As Chief Sykes said so eloquently, she articulated, reentry does not start when a person is released from confinement, nor does it start when an individual is sentenced in court. Reentry begins the moment following the commission of a crime. If surrounded by the right people and the right resources, that individual can begin to establish or rebuild a life that is law-abiding and rewarding. I think that makes so much sense because as we learned about the history of reentry. Mr. Overton talked to us about being either a resource council or a service council. So Chief, although you just became the chief last year, is spot on. It's really being surrounded by the right people and resources that individual can begin to establish or rebuild a life that is law-abiding and rewarding. That directly correlates to being in the business of helping people be better. I digress. As a council, our convener, Caitlin Sweeney, said to you, our mission is to provide collaborative support and resources that identify and eliminate the barriers that individuals impacted by the criminal legal system and their families face. We serve a diverse population. In doing so, we must be sensitive to the distinctions that each individual brings with them in their posture of need. They're bringing their authentic selves. their authentic selves, all that comprises them. And in the Department of Corrections, we like this nice little visual. It's like an iceberg. We can see certain things at the tip, but all those things that factor into who that individual is under the surface are so large and vast. That's the posture our Reentry Council wants to be in. We want to be able to service the whole individual. So our decision to focus on exploring dimensions of diversity and inclusion in reentry as a council is critical to our ability to provide collaborative support and resources that identify and eliminate these barriers. We want to eliminate barriers. The decision to take a closer look at 3 underserved populations, the whole purpose of us being here today is to highlight what we're going to look at. And those underserved populations are women, children, and the developmentally disabled. This month is a great place to start elevating our awareness. I'll say that again. Our decision as a council to really take a closer look at the underserved populations as it relates to diversity and inclusivity from a reentry lens. From that lens, women, youth, and the developmental disabled is a great place to elevate our awareness. As we know, our state government has continued to lead by example through its embrace of diversity, opportunities, and inclusion as its core objective. I'm here to tell you that the Department of Corrections has followed suit, lock and step. Our director, Harold Clark, has established many business practices within the Virginia Department of Corrections, but the one that is most near and dear to me is diversity, equity, and inclusion. Director Clark acknowledges that we are different together. We are not all the same, and we draw on differences in who we are, what we have experienced, and how we think. Most of all, as a department, we recognize these differences are our greatest strength because we service the citizens of the Commonwealth. We believe in including and giving everyone a voice. You might think, what does that have to do with reentry? It's pivotal. Mr. Overton talked about 2011, 11 years of service. One of the initial council members being our previous leader, Tracy Lavely, as a representative of the Department of Corrections. I say that is important that our department understands the value of difference and that we're learning and we're growing to understand that even on an elevated level is critical because we service the population that will be in our communities. So to have a greater understanding is critical. So thank you, Director Clark. We are one of the largest agencies in state government, nearly 12,000 full and part-time employees. As a result, we create an indelible print in reentry when we value and leverage differences for the good of staff, stakeholders, and our communities. As a council, we must always recognize difference. Just as a department, we must always recognize difference, whether it be demographic, cultural, origins, skills and abilities, attitudes, ideas, philosophies, beliefs, experiences, or perspectives, and ensure that inclusivity is an intentional goal. We must be intentional. Otherwise, we inherently promote the barriers we hope to eliminate. At present, I am privileged to sit on the Directors Diversity and Inclusion Council. It is a privilege, which is led by our Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer, Chi Nguyen. As a council, we have adopted diversity and inclusion strategic plan. We've adopted diversity inclusion champions. Those are employees that promote DEI. We are in the process of establishing a logo. We're serious about this work to broaden our awareness. Yes, we are. And that's just a few of the things that we are doing under the leadership of Director Clark. Our greatest accomplishment I will offer to this speaker series or to anyone listening, our greatest accomplishment as a department is that we began the journey of DEI as a department. Understanding that with further assessment, elevated awareness, integration of principles and practices, and establishing a culture inherently impacts reentry in a positive and a progressive way. So that's why I'm excited about being here today, because the work aligns itself. Chief just said a little earlier this morning, that's Chief Sykes, that is a marriage. It is a union. It is a collaborative effort. So I'm excited about being here. Thank you again, Vincent. I'm ready for the questions.
Thank you so much. One second. Awesome. So as just for everybody, you're more than welcome to submit questions into the chat specifically for everybody to see, or you're welcome to send them to me just more direct. But I did have a couple of questions that came in to me directly. Derwin, a question for you. When you're looking at the history, what was kind of the decision-making process behind going between being a resource council and being a case management council? Were there pluses or were the pluses and minuses, do you think, from your perspective about that decision?
That's an excellent question. We had an eclectic group of individuals at the time that represented a variety of entities. The main decision that was made was a discussion about the resources and our ability to utilize those resources appropriately. As I mentioned when I was discussing this topic, one of our biggest challenges was a consent to release information, and we hadn't really figured out how we were going to be able to share specific information without violating someone's confidentiality, which was of the utmost importance and always have been because of the population that we deal with. Some people believe that you can frivolously just share information about returning citizens because they have a background or whatever, and no, they should be respected just like anyone else's information. So that was part of the challenge that we faced. Isn't what we wanted to do, is how we wanted to do it. We wanted to share the information because at OAR, we use a model called transition from jail to the community. And in using transition from jail into the community, one of the biggest things was knowing the resources and the entities that were available to help. So in knowing the resources and entities that were available to help, it really didn't put us or other entities in the place where we really needed the staff cases, because Fairfax County was such a resource-rich area. And something no one said, and I'm very proud of this group, there isn't a dollar to run this reentry council. We're talking about having a picnic, and we had to figure out what resources we were going to use and how we were going to have a picnic for each other. Caitlin is doing this great job that she's doing right now. And I can't speak for her entity or whatever the case may be, but I know at OAR, when I was the convener, there wasn't an extra nickel or a drop of anything in me taking on these additional responsibilities. So that was also another challenge. We have a wealth of resources and funding for entities to do what they needed to do, but there really wasn't any funding or anything to pull us together as a group in order to identify who was going to be the holder of the information, who was going to make sure that certain things were going to be accomplished. And when you look at a nonprofit like OAR, we have grants, outcomes, and other inputs that we must follow up on and identify and make sure that they happen. Who was going to do that was also part of the challenge. So we talked about it as a group, and as a group, we decided those resources were a challenge. And we also felt like we had a wealth of resources and things available for people, and that is what allowed us to go in the direction that we have gone in thus far. But every year, it still comes up. Are we going to be a resource, or are we going to be a reentry council? And that's what we continue to discuss ongoingly.
Awesome. Thank you, Derwin. I had a question for Chief Sykes. So you had mentioned that you had moved from kind of avoiding biased decision making by making it kind of automated. What was the process of that automation? Just because of the fact that sometimes I think the research has shown that sometimes the automation itself is biased. So just if you have any details about how that was created to kind of avoid those biases from automation.
What I can say is that the department always is looking for ways to improve our business practices. I can say that in the development of those systems that we use, those assessments that we use, they're vetted. You know, they go through a process of seeing, you know, what the research has been like, you know, utilized in other areas and other avenues. So I know our director is very good about going outside of the state as well as the country, you know, to just bring back best practices. We have a plethora of subcommittees and work groups and things like that that come together, because when things like that are, you know, showing in the research that may be biased, that's where the reworking comes from. And that's why I mentioned that compass, being changed because of some articles that, anyone, can pull up those public articles that have been, published that is talking, directly to that, talking to the fact that, some of the instruments, some of the things that are fed into the scales, or fed into the results that we get for a recommended level, or we have what you call a case supervision review. And so that, determines whether that person's level stays the same, moves down, moves up, whatever. So the questions that are, fed into that, if there's any, bias that shows through our use, our practice of it for years, we do reconvene, together, and we discuss the pros and the cons and come up with a plan to move forward in a different way. So I guess that's the process, is using what it is, the information already available to us out there, and then putting it into practice, on our own. And then when things arise, we readjust.
Thank you so much. Question just came in the chat for Angela. How would incorporating D&I into the council look like just to you?
That's a great question. Thank you, Vincent. I think that question kind of answers itself when we start looking at the myriad of what diversity is, and really open ourselves to inviting participation or membership. I think that allows us to not only open it up to, I don't know. I'm thinking big, Vincent, but I won't. But just more conversation, different together, means that we should probably not all look the same. When I see this panel right now, we're top heavy, and I said that to the chief today. You see myself, you see Chief, you see Caitlin, and we're all members of the Department of Corrections. So we really have one voice. We're going to give you one voice. We have the privilege of having Derwin here as well. So that's a nonprofit perspective. But imagine if we had the family element. If we're talking about the impact on families, but imagine if we had that, the family of a returning citizen. Imagine if we had someone sitting on this council, or the perspective of a youth, child, or someone from that set of lenses. When we think about faith-based, of course, that's always welcome, but the myriad of the faith-based community around the county of Fairfax, imagine if we could probably have one sect of that on the council, lending voice, teaching us, elevating our understanding. And of course, we want the jails and the CSBs, and DARS is already here, DSS. Imagine if we all could sit together and really sit down and have a meaningful discussion about how we can better serve our population, because the population is here. And believe it or not, the population is advancing and growing. And believe it or not, the population works next door to you, serves you at the grocery store, lives in the community next to you. The population is us. If we could, and I'll take my chief statement. She said, if we could just normalize it to some degree, we can normalize it and remove the stigma away from that. These are a sect of people. No, they're people that deserve service and have needs just like you and I. So I don't know if that answers the question, but I just think the possibilities are enormous if we open up the opportunity to be a part of this council. Thank you.
Of course, thank you. Yes, I would just do a follow-up question to you or to the entire panel as to how do we get those voices to the table? How can we as a council kind of make it so we can open it up and say that everybody is open to the public and everybody's welcome to join, but how do we actively kind of make that a part of what we're trying to do?
I'm going to cheat because that was a follow-up to me. If we believe it as a council, I don't think there's anything we can't do. We put parameters around it, and we do what we're doing today. We bring awareness. We have speaker series. We have picnics. We have events that we invite. We invite those individuals here. I think that's what we do. We require the members of the council that are members now, less talk, more work. Put your money where your mouth is. Let's get out there and do it. If that makes sense a little bit, let's be invested in it. So that's what I would say. That's my cheat, Vincent. Derwin's going to give you the real answer.
Look, purposeful and intentionally. That's how we do it, for sure.
Usually in the past, on a yearly basis, we look at the makeup of the Reentry Council and who we do and do not have as far as Reentry Council is concerned. And we go out with a specific recruitment task in mind, is to recruit or to find individuals that can add to the diversity, the knowledge, the resources, and the wealth of this resource Reentry Council, so that we're able to do the work that we do. That's kind of been put on hold a little bit once we went real virtual. That was something that really happened more when we were together. And I'm pretty sure once we get support and help for Caitlin, because it's supposed to be 2 individuals, we will in turn be able to look at the diversity and makeup of this council to make sure it's representative of the individuals that we serve and the community that we serve.
Yep, I would just follow exactly what Derwin said in terms of, looking at the future of the council. We definitely want to identify and address any sort of gaps, because really, as we've heard today so far, having all the voices in the room is critical to our success as a council, as individuals, etc. And so that is definitely something that we're looking to do in the future, is to identify and address those, any gaps that may be there.
I guess I'll follow up with something that was put in the chat as far as a comment about how to handle just kind of the loss of potential knowledge as members of the council kind of retire or move on. How do we ensure that we keep that knowledge base, just kind of and not necessarily reinvent the wheel, so to speak. So how do you ensure that you keep that knowledge base throughout? Obviously, Derwin gave us the history, but how for other councils or for this council, if we see other people, higher up individuals leave, how do we kind of address that and make sure that we keep that knowledge kind of moving throughout as people move?
Derwin, were you going to address it, or you want me to say?
You go ahead, Lakita.
Okay. I think how we address it is again, being intentional about things. We have to keep copious notes about what is taking place so that that information can be handed down for sure. We also hopefully won't have a massive exit at one time, so we'll have, a mix of more wise, more seasoned members along with the new, people coming along. We definitely want to make sure that we keep the message going for what we're here to do. And so like when we reconvened and we looked at the mission statement and everything, and we said, Derwin said himself, this was good at that time. He said, I don't know what I was thinking at that time, with the creation of the mission statement. But, in our just full transparency, it was more talking about public safety, and instead of being more person-centered, and just as life happens and our work evolves, there's going to be times, when we rethink and rework and reimagine, our goal, what we're setting out to do. And I just feel like the way we keep it going, the way we keep it motivated, is just to keep members active. We have our meeting schedule lined up through the end of the year. It includes our general council meetings as well as the steering committee meetings. So having committed individuals to make those meetings, anyone can sign up for something. I say this all the time. We really want people who are invested. We don't want people to sign up because they are pending a grant, approval or, things of that nature. That comes along with it. And those are great things, of course, because we do need resources in order to have a greater impact. But we want people to join with heart and commitment. So that's how I think we'll keep it going. And, as we have new members to join with passion.
I'd like to follow Chief with that, just simply because I'm just in working in a multi-generational workforce, Vincent. I think there's such value in every generation, whether it be vets or boomers or Xers or millennials or Zers or whomever. And I think when Chief and Derwin talks about being intentional with the recruitment and the purpose, and Caitlin talks about filling gaps, I think we have the opportunity to be very intentional in making certain that the council looks like the multi-generational workforce, if that be the case. And in doing so, those copious notes or that wisdom that comes about with succession planning, I think it becomes inherent, because people have that passion and that degree of investment. So you never really lose. You're just always succeeding, waiting for the next movement. Because as Duran and Chief discussed, there is fluidity in our focus, and we have to be able to move and adjust and pivot. That's a big word with us in department, be able to see it and pivot for the need of the population that we're serving. So I think I'm pretty redundant, but I think we can be intentional in that regard. Vincent.
Thank you. Derwin, I didn't know if you want to speak on it as well.
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. So I see that we still have a few minutes left, so please feel free if anybody else has any questions, just go ahead and put it in the chat or just send it to me directly. I wanted to ask a question to you all because I know you all won't be on the other panels throughout the month, but I know that you've had experience working with the kind of diverse populations, diverse clients that we will be talking about over the next 3 sessions. Is there something that you would like to speak on about the importance of services to women or working impact incarceration has on children or services to individual with disabilities? I definitely wanted you all to, with your wealth of knowledge, have the opportunity to speak on any of those issues at this time. And since we are introducing the whole session, the whole series.
I just have a quick thing, and I sometimes go in strange ways with the things I have, but most recently there was this company, Bombas, I believe it is, and they make socks. And now they make socks, and I never knew that I could order socks to fit my feet. Previously, you'd order socks and we'd have tube socks and you'd fold them under because they were too long for you. They weren't specialized for you. They didn't fit. My analogy and the things that I'm saying is what's one of the important things as far as diversity and reentry is concerned is no longer can we believe that you can serve women the same way that you can serve men as far as reentry is concerned. There's levels of trauma and things that you have to take into consideration as far as women are concerned and the barriers and the things that they face. So that's why I believe that it's a very important topic to have as far as diversity is concerned, because as a person who's been in an organization for over 20 years, I'm embarrassed to say that there was a time where we served women the same way that we serve men. And that's a challenge. When you talk about disabled individuals, I think that covers the gamut of the type of individuals that we serve and we help. And one of the things that we all know is that the clients that we serve usually don't have mental health help or the resources to go to the Department of Rehabilitation Services to get assessed in order to know what's going on with them. So the more information that we can share about how you can be sensitive to the issues and needs of a person that may be presented to you as a whole person, but in turn have some disabilities that will prevent them being successful, not only about their background, not only because of potentially their race, but what about the disabilities and other things that are happening with them? And last but not least, children. For every one individual incarcerated, there's 2.5 children involved and engaged. Serve those adults, and we will in turn break the generational cycle of crime by getting children out of that cycle by doing some of the smaller things that we can do in order to help the adults. And those were the biggest things and the takeaways that I'm hoping that we get from engaging with these series and learning more why these are important and necessary for reentry.
I just want to say thank you, sir. Thank you for that. That was my only comment. Spot on.
It's hard to follow, but I want to give space for other people if they want to say something.
We dare not follow Vincent. Next question. We can drop the mic on that one. He covered it all. The word that stands out for me that he said, being sensitive, just sensitive. There is a residual effect. We know it, we understand it. Now let's do the work to eliminate those barriers that impact it. Super job.
Well, with everybody, with Derwin dropping the mic, I just wanted to just give each one of our panelists just a chance to just have some final thoughts, just kind of just to speak on anything they would like to speak on, and just kind of then just to thank you all for kind of taking your time to speak and kind of give this information to us all. So I'll. Do you want to?
Sure. I'll just begin by saying just thank you again so much for your time. We are so appreciative that you find reentry to be an important topic as well. And also I'll say that, Angela asked me earlier, she said, what is your goal, of all of this? What is what do you hope to come from the speaker series and the council as a whole? And I'll just reiterate what I said to her personally. I just really feel as though if we have that other voice, if we have, the lives that we're impacting, or we're helping to impact, I should say, on a daily basis, I would love to see more engagement there, because we do have to do this together. The population we serve does not have all the answers, or they wouldn't be in the situation they're in. And of course, the stakeholders, DOC and, others, we don't have all the answers either, or we wouldn't always be, reinventing the wheel, or, trying to do what works, because we look at history, and though we gain some progress in history, we can always improve. So just coming together more and bouncing ideas, and knowing that once we create a work, that does not mean it has to stay that way. We can revamp and do what is necessary in order to achieve success together. So just thank you again for your attention today.
I would just like to say thank you, everyone, for being here, as well as for those that are council members or organizations that are currently working towards successful reentry in Fairfax County. Just thank you so much for your dedication and the daily work that you do. We don't always get to see the impact of the work that we do, but it is still there. And if we can keep that positive forward momentum as a council, I see great success in the future, which is what we've seen thus far. So just thank you, everyone, for being here, as well as the work that you do day in and day out.
I'll give Angela the last word.
Oh, clearly.
That's so great and everything with things. Thank you guys for this opportunity to be able to speak. It's flattering that people will take the time to hear us, to speak on the population that are important to us. Only other thing I will add as far as this is concerned is you're looking at people that aren't dabbling in something. This is our life work. This is what we're committed to. This is what we believe in. And we would love to have you join us in engaging in this work and impacting the lives of individuals that are trying to reach self-sufficiency and navigate through the judicial system. So we look forward to you joining us at our regular meetings, and thank you so much. And I'll pass it off to Angela.
You're amazing, but that really was the ending word, Mr. Overton, simply because you started this with this council 11 years ago. And there was intent in starting with this work that we were going to impact this community in a profound way. And we have done just that. So the thing that I would say, Vincent, that I'd really leave with anyone is that we have a responsibility to do the work. We have a responsibility. It is our community. It is our people. It is us. It's us. And we have a responsibility to elevate in any area that we can. When we know better, we do better. So let's just do better because we know better. Take every opportunity to elevate our knowledge that we might do better. I'm privileged to be here, completely privileged. The nerves are gone. I'm excited for the people that joined. The series is happening the whole month that we're going to delve a little deeper. Come join us. We're dedicated to it. Thank you, Vincent. Thank you, Duran. Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Caitlin, for the opportunity.
Thank you all so much. This was just an honor and a privilege and a great way to start off our speaker series. I just want to remind everyone that we will have 3 more of these sessions. So it's going to be every Tuesday starting at noon and likely going to 1 or 1:15. So please come, please bring your questions. Please, if you want to make sure that you get the Zoom links, make sure you register through the Eventbrite. And then there will be an email sent out with each Zoom link on the morning of each session. So again, we're really looking forward to the next 3 series and for you next 3 events and for you to kind of delve in with us. As Caitlin also said, be on the lookout for the flyer as far as the picnic is concerned, just to kind of figure out where we go from there for that event. So with that, thank you all so much. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day and we look forward to see you next week.
And thank you to Vincent for being our moderator today, as well as our tech support 24/7. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. It was a